We have breaking news. A jury has found Daniel Penny not guilty of criminal negligent homicide in the death of Jordan Neely. Last week, a judge dismissed the top charge of second-degree manslaughter after the jury said it was deadlocked on that count. Prosecutors claimed Penny held Neely for too long, causing his death in a chokehold, while the defense argued Penny acted in self-defense. ABC's Stephanie Ramos is outside that courtroom in New York City, and ABC legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer is here with me. Stephanie, talk me through this. What's the latest on this verdict?
Well, as you said, Daniel Penny has been found not guilty of criminal negligent homicide. Sorry, it's getting really loud out here. We've got protesters and counter-protesters who have been here this morning. You could actually hear them from the 13th floor courtroom earlier today. And now that we have this verdict in, there are a lot of angry people out here. The jury deliberated last week. We know that Friday, the judge dismissed the manslaughter charge. The jury was asked to reconvene today to focus over the weekend on that lesser charge of criminal negligent homicide, which they did and have found that verdict. We know the jury, made up of seven men and 5 women, came together here to find Daniel Penny not guilty of that charge, which carries up to 4 years in prison. But of course, outside the courtroom here, there have been protesters and counter-protesters here all morning and all week, and many people upset about this verdict. Diane.
And Stephanie, I'm not sure if you can move and show us, but can you at least tell us what the scene is like there now?
So what police have done this morning is earlier this morning, there was a walkway here. There were some barricades kind of separating where the media is and the park that is here. But the defense lawyers for Daniel Penny asked for a mistrial because they said because that manslaughter charge on Friday was dismissed, and because they say that the protesters here were influencing the jury, they wanted another mistrial, or they wanted a mistrial today. The judge denied that. But what police have done is they've put up certain barricades to keep those counter-protesters and protesters together, which is just not making the situation any easier or better for the folks that are in the courtroom, where where they're chanting is very much audible. Diane.
And I want to ask Brian a little bit more about the charge here, because, Brian, they started with manslaughter, second-degree manslaughter. The jury was deadlocked on that. The judge dismissed it. Then criminally negligent homicide. Now you have this verdict of not guilty. Explain the difference in those charges and what you make of the jury coming back with this verdict.
So manslaughter in the second degree deals mostly with the idea of recklessness, whether or not someone knew of the dangers that could happen from putting someone in a chokehold for that long and then disregarded it. Negligence misses that element of knowing and then disregarding. It's only that you did not conform your actions to what a reasonable person would. And so Daniel Penny, according to the jury, deadlocked on the recklessness, and now not guilty on the negligence. From a legal standpoint, it doesn't really all that much make sense, but this, I think, credit to the defense attorney, comes down to great jury selection, because ultimately the jury decided, probably not so much based on the elements of the crime, but more so on, we think what Daniel Penny did was correct, that if someone was on the train with us, we would hope that a Daniel Penny would be there. It's maybe jury nullification, maybe a compromise, maybe whatever it may be, but it's a good day for Daniel Penny.
Brian, the fact that the top charge was dismissed because of a hung jury, can they try to re-prosecute again on that manslaughter charge specifically? Well,
technically speaking, the top charge of manslaughter was a hung jury. The prosecution told the judge that they would be open to dismissing the count. Typically, the only way that you can retry an individual after a jury has already started to hear the case is after a mistrial, but that's not why that top charge was dismissed. It was dismissed because the prosecution wanted it to be dismissed. So the answer is no. That manslaughter can't come back, and now with the not guilty verdict on the criminal negligent homicide, that can't come back either.
Stephanie, are you hearing or seeing any reactions outside the court?
It seems as though the protesters and counter-protesters have settled down just a bit, but earlier this morning we could hear many of them saying, say his name, chanting. As I said earlier, it was audible in the 13th floor courtroom. And as Penny entered the courtroom, we were here as that played out. He was met with competing chants of murderer and not guilty. Now, I'm just getting word that in the courtroom, when that verdict was read, some in the courtroom applauded, and they, of course, were instructed to be quiet. But the father, I believe, of Jordan Neely, the homeless man who was killed on that subway train last year, apparently was heard cursing, was asked to leave. Also said it was a small world, and another a woman crying. So mixed reaction in the courtroom and out here outside the courthouse, Diane.
Brian, is there any recourse for prosecutors at this point, or is this case over?
This case is over. I mean, both in terms of their decision to ultimately tell the judge they wanted to dismiss that top count, and then the jury coming back and saying not mistrial, not hung, but not guilty on that criminal negligent homicide. I can't see a legal recourse for the prosecution. In following this case, both from a contributor standpoint and an attorney standpoint, I'm not all that shocked based on just how the jury was put together and just the division within the city, that 12 people decided, no, not guilty.
All right, Stephanie Ramos, Brian Buckmeyer, thank you both.